authentic conversations about conversations I avoid. Acacia, Thorny Conversations.
We were having a discussion one day with my siblings, and I think my mother was there. And we realized something very interesting, that my mother was married either in her teenage or just freshly out of her teen years. And of course, jokingly, we said what was clear and acceptable in her days is unthinkable in our times. What might have been a light-hearted chat around a table is a stronger challenge elsewhere. It's a challenge of teenage pregnancies. It's another topic we seldom talk about, but which I think we need to address. Hi again, my name is Saya, and this is Acacia, which means authentic conversations around conversations I, and probably you, would like to avoid. The United States annually reports around 1 million, just pause that, 1 million teenage pregnancies between people in their 15 to 19 years. This is around, the estimate says this is around 19% higher than the figure elsewhere within Europe and other developed areas of the world. But just think about that for a moment. 1 million teenagers. With the way the world currently works, by the time somebody is in their teenage, number one, their mental development is not fully ready to be able to handle the rigors of being a parent. Number two, in all likelihood, it is very possible that when you're a teenage parent, it is an unwanted pregnancy. It's something that both of you didn't know would happen or expected or hoped it will not happen, but has happened. And then three, the realities of how long it takes to study and when it takes to get to work. It means financially you may not be ready to raise up a child. And so the challenge of teen pregnancy is huge, not just in America, but everywhere within the world. In Kenya, among tribes like the Maasai and other tribes that betroth their girls very young, teen pregnancies happen at an extremely early age. And unfortunately, in those respective communities, the teenagers are becoming pregnant from people extremely older than they are. And besides, therefore, the lack of psychological preparation to become parents and to take the responsibility of parenting, the effect it could have on the physiology of the girl is huge, because this means they have had an earlier sexual debut, which then predisposes them, if especially they're having multiple sexual partners, to things like cervical cancer. In addition, think about the disruption this does to their education. And because of their financial position at this point, it may set them up for a life of poverty or unnecessary strain. Also, in many societies, since teen pregnancy is frowned upon, there's going to be an immense strain either on the girl, the unborn child, the father of the child, or all of them. And because they're again not yet ready to take all of this, this is extremely difficult a thing to go through. The society is split on this because of the free love and open sex policy that many embrace. Some people see no immediate challenge in this because they do not see any need for people to be restricted. Besides, there's a lot of push on the use of contraception and other birth control mechanisms to try and allow teenagers to have earlier sexual debuts while being able to be prevented from this. And so on the minds of some, the whole issue of teen pregnancy is a failure on enforcement of contraception and not a bigger problem than that. Yet others take the ground and say, like, no, teen pregnancy is huge. It's going to create more problems because we're going to have children raising children whom they themselves are not yet ready or well equipped to be able to do it. The Bible is clear on the matter of God's design for marriage, which is the same position the church does take. Because God's original design, first in Genesis 2, when the whole institution of marriage is spoken about, from verse 17, where God introduces the idea of Adam will need a helpmeet. And finally, when it comes through from verses 23 all the way to the end of the chapter, the Bible is clear. It talks about a man leaving his father and mother and joining to his wife, and the two becoming one flesh. And then it is after this union that later on in Genesis 4, the children are born into this union. Therefore, in God's order of things, same thing when you read in Genesis 1:26, he makes them male and female and then blesses them and says to them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth, replenish it and subdue. That the multiplication, replenishing and subduing comes only after the union has been done. So God's ideal, which is also the church stand, is that the ideal situation for marriage, for children to be raised is in a long-term, mature, committed union of marriage between a man and a woman. That is God's ideal for where children should be raised up. Science has a lot to back the fact that children who grow up in homes where there's stability, where this father is present there, where the mother is present there, such children have better odds than as compared to children who are raised up in situations where either one of the parents is lacking. So the Bible position, therefore, is clear on God's ideal for marriage. Besides, there are clear commandments that prohibit sex outside of marriage. Least of it being the seventh commandment that is categorical, that talks about adultery. And in it is included all variants of sexual relationships that are outside the biblically recognized marriage. And the reality is that a lot of teen pregnancies are as a result of sexual activity that is not approved or allowed within the Bible. And therefore, a lot of teen pregnancy is a result of behavior that traditionally the Bible is not going to be allowing. Why should teen pregnancy bother us? Why should it worry us? I've alluded to some of the things already. One of it being the fact that basically teen pregnancies means children are raising children, or ill-prepared children are soon going to be the parents to other children, which is less than ideal. But then secondly, think about how it often pans out. In developing countries, like where I come from, often these children who are born, the new unborn children, will be given to their grandparents to be raised. That already will present a number of challenges. A, resources, mental, material, relational, to raise the children well. The children will be at a disadvantage. B, discipline and the enforcement of such things will become a challenge. Something that affects the girls disproportionately and unfairly, I must admit, is many of the girls who become teenage mothers or become expectant when they're teenage are required or forced or needed to drop out of school or discontinue their school for some time because they need to either give care to the child, or many countries have laws where girls who've been able to conceive while in school are not able to continue with school, or just the social stigma and the shame, and also just the logistics of being a mother and a student at the same time mean that many of them cannot continue. And once education is interrupted or interfered with, we begin a cascade of other things. It means the skill level of such an individual is lower, which means the sort of jobs they'll be going into in the future will be capped at a certain place, which means their likelihood of remaining in poverty is increased, or sliding into poverty is increased. And so just from teenage pregnancy, we can begin cascading into many other difficult things. Thirdly is the challenge that most teenage pregnancies would result into single parenting, and with single parenting comes a number of disadvantages that unfairly now disproportionately target the child. Most single parent families would have lesser income, which means the opportunities a child could be exposed to would be lower. Number two, it means the child will be denied the access to one of the parents. It is advantageous if both parents were there, but now, because of the way most teenage pregnancies work out, there's only going to be one parent, and most likely it's going to be the mother, and the absence of the father is going to influence adversely the growth of the child without the benefit of their father. So at an individual, and just the way the whole thing pans out, teenage pregnancy presents quite an amount of challenge. Nationally, the burden that teenage pregnancies put on either A, the health system, or B, the education system, is something worth considering, because this fallout and attrition rates from school arising from teenage pregnancies hold a country back from achieving its desired education levels. And then nationally, the additional burden being put on health services by this additional pool of mothers who need not be there at this point is something that we could be spared of, and the countries could be able to do better, and the girls could be able to enjoy their childhood. Needless to mention, things like this teenage is robbed of precious teen years when they needed to be in self-discovery, when they needed to explore and to grow. Needless to mention that there's going to be the pressure of social stigma and changing and begin taking adult responsibilities when they're young, and this is impactful. If you're the person suffering, or if you're the person who is moved and driven to do something, what is it that you can do? I think there are three potential solutions to somebody who finds themselves as a teen mother. But before I even begin speaking about those, I think prevention is a best form. The only way to get pregnant is to have sex. Or, unless most teenage pregnancies are not because of in vivo fertilization, most of them are just sex that is not planned or sex that is not thought through. And so, ultimate cure number one would be abstinence. It's a hard sell in this age and time, but it is the only scientifically proven way to prevent teenage pregnancies. But let's speak about this a bit more deeply. Sex as an event, teenage sex as an event, is, let me use this word, it's a destination. It's somewhere people get to. And for you to get to a certain destination, you need to follow a road or a path or a series of steps that get you there. So teenage sex does not just happen. It is the net result of following certain steps. It's the net result of following a certain path. Or let's put the principle this way. Every road has a destination. Every road has a destination. If I save, I will reach a destination that is called financial security. If I overspend, I will reach a destination called brokenness. So every road in life has a destination. And so if we think of teenage pregnancy as a destination, if we're going to do something, especially in the realm of prevention, we need to begin asking ourselves, what is this road that leads to that destination called teenage pregnancy? And that would be probably the beginning point to address this. Later, we're going to discuss about contraceptions, condoms, and all those things. That's a discussion. But if we are going to be truthful to what is scientifically proven to work for teenage pregnancies, which is abstinence, we need to take this conversation by the horns and ask ourselves, what's the path that leads our teenagers to the point of having sex? And then that sex ultimately leads them to the situation where they're having pregnancies that are unwanted, unplanned, that are putting into jeopardy their present and their future. And you'd find that that road that leads to teen pregnancies has got things like freedoms without regulation. So freedoms to watch things like movies, to engage in parties, to do things like that do not have controls. It is true that teenagers are growing into becoming adults, but even then they need the help, they need the support, they need the supervision of people who know more than them. So one of the things that we probably could get back to is to begin looking like whichever the society, whether it's a rural, poor place or it's urban, well-controlled, we need to begin thinking in terms of the freedoms and the support or regulation and mentorship we're giving to the young people. Is it proportional? Have we given so much freedom and too little support or regulation? Or have we given too much regulation and too little freedom? The two need to balance well, because when the two get out of shape, if there's too much regulation and too little freedom, the teenagers will rebel and get into sex as a way of expressing themselves. If we give too much freedom and too little regulation, they will have too much freedom on their hands and they'll begin not knowing how to use it. So I think a proper balance of both is going to be important if we are going to be candid about dealing with a road that leads to ultimate teen sex. Number two is, what are we feeding our minds on? What is the forms of entertainment? What are the forms of pastime activities that young people are involving themselves in? Teen should be a time of self-discovery. It should be a time where people discover their abilities, their gifts, their passions. Are we intentionally creating opportunities where this is true? Where people can be able to engage in things that are recreational and not just merely amusing? Where we're not just spending days on end binge watching movies and not doing enough with the physical energy that is characteristic of the teen years. So we need to go back and looking at, as an individual, as a teenager, how am I using my teen time? As guardians, as teachers, as governments, how are we constructing the use of time? Are we balancing the mental, the physical, the emotional growth, or are we overburdening? Are we putting them too much in class that they have so much pent energy that they want to discharge otherwise? Or are we putting them out there in the wild, they're burning the energy and running out of things to do and end up exploring too far than they should be? So teen should be a time of exploration, and that exploration should be guided and opportunities for the same should be created. I think if we consider these two, the proper balance of freedom and regulation and the deliberate creation of environments where teenagers can safely explore their abilities, their passion, their gifts, their talents, while receiving support to do that. When we do that, we will be carving paths that will minimize or altogether reduce the risk, the temptation of people getting into teenage pregnancy. What we feed our minds is going to be deliberately shown in what we produce with our lives. But that's so good for prevention. Now you've become pregnant and you're a teenager. What's the things we do? You really have three options, biblically speaking. Option number one is single parenting. It is a sensitive topic, but increasingly society is warming up to the idea of single parenting. Please notice, in the initial part of this dialogue with you, I've pointed out what the Bible says. The Bible's ideal still remains. It is father, mother, with their child together. That's the Bible's ideal. But now I'm speaking to you who is already in a situation where you have this child, and one of the options you can have is being a single parent. But it's going to be a decision you need to make with the following consciousness. Number one, you need to become intentional about the support that you will get to supplement for the absence of the other parent. You'll need a lot of counseling, you need lots of mentorship, you'll need lots of intentionality to be able to be ready mentally for that. Number two, you will need to become clear about the way you will get resources to support yourself, whether it's financial and others, so that you don't get deeper and deeper into a hole. So this is just a pure awareness. It's just me as a brother, me as a son, me as a friend, speaking to you and saying like, yeah, single parenting is one of the options that you can consider, but these are the realities that come with it. That you will need to get support as a person, the child will need to get support to supplement for the parent who's not there. And two, you will need to be able to think carefully about how will you provide for yourself on the other things, and how will you provide for the child for the other things that you need to go to. The second option, equally not ideal, but option on the table, is marriage. Now, let me quickly put this disclaimer out there and say, the fact that you're pregnant with somebody is not reason enough for you to get married to them. The Bible says, can two walk together unless they agree? Now, granted, in many societies, the moment you become pregnant, there's immense pressure for you to marry or to get married, either to the, whether you're the boy or the girl in that situation. Now, the emotion involved around that is not the best atmosphere to make the decision to get married. However, again, I'm speaking squarely to the individual who is already in this situation. If you're not in this situation, probably you don't want to consider this. But if you're already expectant as a teenager, the second option you have to think through is marriage. This will need a lot of counseling, the normal marital counseling that makes you make the decision like, is this the person with the right attributes? Is this the person with the right abilities? Do they have the maturity? Do I possess the maturity to be able to do this? Have I found out God's purpose and calling for my life, and will forging this union help me become a better parent, help me become a better person, help me fulfill that which is God's ideal for my life, and help the other person fulfill God's ideal for their life? By temperament, are we going to be mated and matched, or are we just going to be mated? Are we just going to be a couple, but we're not really going to be matched? We're not going to bring out the best in each other. There are many powerful, important questions that you need to work through. So don't rush through and just say, hey, I'm pregnant, hey, I need to get married, and these are the things we will figure out. No. What is hazy during dating is crystal clear in marriage. You see, it said, love is blind, but the neighbors are not. Love is blind, but marriage is an eye-opener. So things you may want to overlook right now because you are pregnant and under pressure and you want to just jump on and continue with this man may end up being the very things that push you away and jeopardize such a union that is hastily formed. So the second option could be marriage, but it's something that needs to be entered in with a lot of prayer, a lot of caution, and a lot of counseling. It's not for everyone. Thirdly, and still less popular, and by now you may realize, like, all the options that exist once you become a teen mother are not ideal. It is because unwanted, unplanned for teen pregnancy is equally itself not ideal. So it'll be a bit of a hard sell to try and get something that is ideal for something that is not ideal. It's just the reality we need to work with. So less ideal, number one, is single parenthood with a mother or father. Less ideal, number two, is a case of marriage. And less ideal, number three, is adoption. Still, you could be able to proceed and get a child and be able to give it up for adoption. This allows the child to be able to get a quality of life they probably would not have afforded with you. It gives the child an opportunity to be alive. Many parents have, of course, that natural attachment to their children, but it is something that you could be able to consider, to give up the child for adoption rather than abort them, rather than subject them through a life that is painful or less than ideal, that you're ill-prepared for. One of the other options I could consider is adoption. In your local area and in your local community, there are both laws and there are agencies that deal with adoption. So you may want to go with them and have a chat with them all about the adoption process, the pros and the cons, and they're able to fittingly advise you if this is something that is suitable for you and whether you are able to go through and what needs to happen with them. So, as you can clearly see, all the options on the table when it comes to dealing with teen pregnancy are not suitable. So I'll go back to the previous point. I believe the best point is prevention. And let me speak again and remind us that when it comes to prevention, we need to choose paths that will lead us to a situation where teen pregnancy is avoided. The thorny issue of contraception as a means arises. Now, what do I have to say about the whole issue of contraception? My big challenge with the issue of contraception is this, is that it fittingly gets into the frame of James 1, verse 13 to 16. This is what James 1, 13 to 16 says. Let no man say when he is tempted that I'm tempted of God. For God is not tempted by evil, neither tempteth he any man. But every man is tempted when he is led away of his own desires and then deceived. And when lust has conceived, it leads to death. My brethren, do not err. So this is the way the Bible puts out how the whole temptation scenario works. It says there's something called lust. Lust are nothing more but God-given desires which are being fulfilled outside of God-given boundaries. God gave us desires so that through them he can fulfill us. And God gave us desires because they reflect his image in us. So 2 reasons. They are a means for God to fulfill us. They are a way to God reflect his image in us. And every God-given desire he has provided God-given environments for them to be fulfilled. When we fulfill God-given desires within God-given environments, they are nice, they're enriching. When we take them outside of God-given boundaries, they become a source of lust. And then what the devil does is he deceives us on our lusts. And when we accept his deception, it leads to sin. My challenge with the whole matter of contraception is this, is that it fails to address, at least from the Christian's point of view, the desires that are being misappropriated, the desires that are being misused. It plays into the deception bit. All of the devil's deceptions that he pushes to us in the area of our lusts have just got to do 2 things. He deceives us that we need whatever it is we are lusting for and that we need it now. And secondly, he deceives us that we can then be able to progress to fulfill that lust in a way that either minimizes the risk or altogether eliminates it. And so contraception, and I know there's a whole ethical debate about should we preserve life or not, but one of the moralistic things that needs to be argued out is, should we be enabling people to violate self, to violate conscience, to violate God's law, and to do it in a way that is apparently successful? And furthermore, what contraception can really be given to cover the conscience? It's possible to preserve life, but what quality of life are you preserving? So I still stand on the side that says we need to help people get to the point of abstinence, and it is possible. And if we get over to the other side and we have sinned, we need to ask God to give us the grace to choose between marriage, between adoption, and to choose between being single parents. I know this is a hot one, and I'll be looking for your comments and for your discussions. Please drop them and share them. And until next time, this is Acacia, and I am Saya.